Young Evan is living his best life in the late 80s with his dog and his mom, Andrea. But when he draws a creepy picture of a murder at school and doesn't remember doing it, his teacher suggests there might be something off. Andrea gets worried and takes him to a doctor, who recommends Evan keep a journal to jog his memory. Things get weirder when Evan zones out and wakes up holding a knife. Then he zones out again at his friends Kaylee and Tommy's house and wakes up in the basement with Kaylee. They're not wearing clothes, and her creepy dad George is filming them while drinking. Evan freaks out, but Kaylee is just blank, and Tommy is breaking a doll in the corner like some kind of angry gremlin. Fast forward 6 years, and Evan's hanging out with Kaylee, Tommy, and their nervous friend Lenny. Tommy, the resident jerk, pulls out fireworks and dares Lenny to prank someone by stuffing one into a mailbox. Evan zones out again, and when he comes to, Lenny is unconscious, and they're dragging him away. Nobody explains what happened, and Evan's memory is still Swiss cheese. One day, Evan finds some mysterious family documents, including a death certificate for his grandfather, who also died in a mental institution. Andrea takes him to the doctor again, who tries hypnosis. Evan remembers a car pulling up near the mailbox, but then his nose starts bleeding like he's in a low-budget horror movie, so they have to stop. Evan tries to ask Tommy what really happened, but Tommy goes full psycho, threatening him into silence. Later, Evan shares a sweet kiss with Kaylee, but Tommy sees it, freaks out, and beats up a random guy at the theater. Tommy is clearly auditioning for the Most Unhinged Teen Award. Things hit rock bottom when Evan and Kaylee catch Tommy in the forest, trying to burn Evan's dog alive. Evan tries to stop him, but he zones out again. When he wakes up, his dog is dead, his face is wrecked, and Andrea decides they need to move ASAP. As they leave town, Evan writes a cheesy, "I'll come back for you," to Kaylee like he's starring in a bad rom-com. Fast forward 7 years, and college-aged Evan is studying psychology and living with a fun roommate, Thumper. They hit the bar to celebrate Evan's blackout-free streak, but things take a turn when Thumper breaks a beer jar and scares off some frat boys. Back at the dorm, Evan reads his old journals to a girl, and oops, he zones out again. Evan wakes up in his teenage body, just in time to relive the dog-burning horror show. This time, he gets beat up even more, and Lenny tries to save the dog but fails. When Evan comes to in his dorm, the girl tells him he just passed out. Evan decides to visit Lenny, who now spends his days building models and avoiding sunlight. It's not the reunion Evan hoped for, but hey, it's a start. Evan grows up having the worst luck ever. After his childhood is full of blackouts and chaos, he's now in college trying to move on. But when he reads an old journal, he accidentally time travels back to a memory where a mailbox explosion traumatizes his friend Lenny. It's so real that Evan wakes up with a scar and throws up. Clearly, this journal thing is not normal. Curious, and maybe a little desperate, Evan talks to his mom about his dad's memory problems. She's vague, but lets slip that his dad figured something out before he went totally off the rails. Then Andrea drags Evan to a psychic for fun, but instead of palm reading, the psychic declares Evan has no soul and wasn't meant to exist. Andrea freaks out because it hits a little too close to home. She'd had 2 stillbirths before Evan. Evan's attempts to move forward go south fast. He visits Kaylee, his childhood crush, at her diner job. Turns out her life hasn't been great. Tommy went to juvie, and their dad George was a total monster. When Evan asks about their disturbing childhood basement incident, Kaylee loses it and storms off. The next day, Evan finds out Kaylee took her own life. He's devastated and decides to use his journal to fix things. He travels back to the creepy basement memory and threatens George, making Kaylee stand up to him. When Evan wakes up, the past has changed. Kaylee's alive, they're dating, and Evan's suddenly a popular frat boy. At first, things seem perfect. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your fellow time travel nerds, and start planning what you'd do if you had this power. Hint, don't meet your ex. And hit subscribe for more content that'll twist your brain into a pretzel. Evan and Kaylee are in love, he's got a fancy life, and George never made those awful videos. But the timeline tweaks come with baggage. Evan's friends don't recognize him. His mom has remarried, and his old buddy Thumper calls him frat boy with zero affection. Things take a dark turn when Tommy shows up with a bat, furious at Evan for ruining his life. They fight, and in a moment of rage, Evan accidentally kills Tommy. Now Evan's in jail, where things go from bad to how is this even real? Prisoners bully him, destroy his journals, and even bribe guards to torment him further. Desperate, Evan salvages a few journal pages and time travels again, ending up as a kid in school. This time he tries to fix things by brute force, hurting himself to send a message to the adults. Clearly, Evan's let's fix my life with time travel plan is not going as smoothly as he hoped. Evan's time traveling adventures hit a new low when he wakes up with mysterious scars, and his cellmate Carlos thinks they're Jesus marks. Carlos, convinced Evan is some kind of holy figure, agrees to help him. Teamwork kicks in when Evan pretends to surrender to his prison harassers, only to stab one of them while Carlos knocks the other out like it's a WWE match. Evan grabs his journals and dives into another memory. This time, Evan rewinds to the dog incident. He hands Lenny a sharp object and gives him a motivational speech about redemption, basically telling him, it's your time to shine. Things go south quickly, and Lenny ends up stabbing Tommy. When Evan returns to the present, his nose is bleeding like crazy, and he has a seizure as his brain tries to sort through new memories. Turns out, Lenny's in a mental institution, Kaylee ran away, and Evan's life is still a dumpster fire. After a dramatic hospital visit where a doctor says Evan's brain looks like it's been crammed with 40 years of memories, Evan decides he's done playing it safe. He steals the doctor's keycard, sneaks around the hospital, and visits Lenny, who's tied to a stretcher. Lenny cryptically tells Evan he always knew something bad would happen, leaving Evan more confused than ever. Evan travels back in time again to meet his dad, Jason, hoping for some fatherly advice. Instead, Jason gives him the ultimate don't play God lecture and tries to kill him. Evan wakes up like, thanks dad, super helpful. Evan then searches for Kaylee, only to find her living in terrible conditions as an addict. Heartbroken, he tries to explain his time-traveling chaos, but she's not buying it. She tells him if he really wants to help, he should save the mother and baby from the mailbox explosion. Fueled by guilt and Kaylee's words, Evan travels back to the mailbox incident. He manages to save the mother and baby, but he gets caught in the explosion himself. When he wakes up, he's missing both arms. New memories flood in, showing that while his friends had happy lives, Evan's in a wheelchair and heavily relying on them. Now in college, Evan's dating Kaylee, hooray, but is super bitter about Lenny being her roommate and bestie. In a fit of jealousy and self-pity, Evan tries to drown himself in the tub, but Tommy, now a religious man, saves him. Evan realizes he's got one last shot to fix things. He travels back to the day he started writing his journals and tries to destroy the firework that caused the mailbox explosion. Things get wild when Andrea catches him with a knife, but Evan is determined. When he wakes up, nothing seems to have changed, so he dives into the basement memory. Evan's final time jump takes him back to the firework fiasco. Just as he tries to fix things, George smacks the firework out of his hands, and Kaylee picks it up at the worst possible moment, right as it explodes. Evan wakes up in a mental institution, confused and bleeding. The doctor tells him the journals were never real, just part of a guilt-fueled fantasy. Turns out, Kaylee died that day, and Evan's been medicated ever since. The revelation hits him hard, and he remembers his dad yelling about a photo album that never existed. Things take a darker turn when Evan learns his brain is permanently damaged, and he's being transferred to long-term care. Andrea visits him, heartbroken, but still brings some old home movies. Evan watches a clip of Andrea pregnant with him and gets a wild idea, one last time travel fix. That night, he sneaks into the doctor's office, barricades the door, and writes a goodbye note. Then he uses the home movie to time jump into his baby self inside the womb. Baby Evan remembers the psychic's warning. He was never meant to be. Deciding to end the chaos for good, he uses the umbilical cord to self-delete. His mom has another stillbirth, and the curse ends with him. Without Evan in the picture, everything miraculously works out. Tommy and Kaylee live happily with their mom. Lenny grows up without trauma, and everyone thrives. Evan's wild ride through time ends with the ultimate reset, proving sometimes the best fix is to just not exist. If you like this video, you'll abductively love the next one. It's got aliens time traveling to snatch humans, because apparently, intergalactic domination wasn't dramatic enough without bending space-time. Click on the left video to witness their chaos, or click on the right for a surprise so wild, even the aliens are confused.